Three Religious Rebels, Part 2, Alberic, Chapter 5. This chapter is entitled, Can It Be Done? The Duke went off to the Orient, and Alberic's plan went into effect. It sounded through the monastic world like a thunderclap. The reverberations that came back to Citeaux caused Stephen Harding to say that it was a good thing that Ilbode and John had gone to Rome. Without that precious letter from Pascal, dated this 18th day of April, 1100, the second year of our pontificate, Alberic most likely would have been in for a worse thrashing than he received at Molem. To say that Citeaux was a challenge to every other existing monastery is to understate fact. Wittingly or unwittingly, she was a condemnation. She was italicizing and underlining every word of St. Benedict's rule with a stylus which wrote so vividly that it spoke. That stylus was the lives of her monks. Robert and his idealism had been strange. Molem in her early days had caused quite a stir. But Alberic was of a different temper and Citeaux of a different caste. She was more rebellious because she was more radical, and he was more daring because she was more independent. No one could touch either her or him. Rome was protector of all that was hid in the swampland about Citeaux. The monks of other monasteries had laughed at the white habits and lampooned the meager meals, but they could not even smile at the challenge contained in the outright refusal to be supported by others. The monastic world cried that it was beyond nature. Alberic retorted that it was according to rule. Then, as years passed without shaking the forests of Citeaux, the monastic world knew it was facing real rebellion. She resented it, but she had seen little as yet. Some months after Odo had set off for the Holy Land, Stephen came upon his abbot wrapped in thought. Before him lay a map of the abbey lands, and to one side a text of the rule. Stephen studied him a moment, then said, "You look serious." "I am serious," came the speedy reply. "So serious that I'm positively unsociable. But a lamb like you doesn't mind lying down by a lion like me." He pushed the map to one side as he said, "The Duke made a remark at that farewell dinner that was meant as a joke, but which has turned out to be the germ of a real idea. Do you remember his saying, the only solution is to make the serfs on the granges members of your community?" Stephen thought a moment, then brightened and said, "Ah, yes. It was after he told you he never took back gifts." "Right," said the abbot. "Well, I've recalled that remark more than once since that day, and more than once this day." Then, with a sudden change of front, he asked, "What do you know about John Galbert and Valambrosa, Stephen?" "Not a thing," said the puzzled prior. "Why?" "Well, he founded an order following St. Benedict's rule, but he introduced a novelty into the world of religious. He had lay assistants, men who were exempted from silence and choir, but who were part of the community since their duty was to take care of all the external offices. Now that historical fact, plus the Duke's parting remark, has had me asking myself all day long, can it be done? Can it be done? Can I take both ideas, John Galbert's and the Duke's, fuse them, and produce something unique? Men who are real religious, but who are exempt from choir. Well, how about the rule? You're surely not going to try an innovation after all these years of fighting for renovation, are you?" "It's the rule that gave me the idea," retorted Alberic. "The rigidity of the rule at that. Here's the situation, Stephen. Pull that chair over and study this thing with me." He drew down the map and pointed to a distant grange. "We can't do without that wheat field, can we?" Stephen looked, recognized it, shook his head and said, "Indeed we can't. That means our bread." And yet you can't harvest that wheat and attend choir, can you? You mean it's too far away. I mean that one or the other has to be neglected. Either you can't sing the office or you can't harvest wheat. We sing the office in the field. I know you do, and that's what I don't like. Now here, and the abbot pointed to a meadow that was even further away than the grange. We need that meadow. Our cattle can't live on air. But how can a cowhand be there and here? He can't. All right now, Stephen, look at this dilemma the rule presents. I'm squarely on the two horns. I want to get off. And the abbot shook his head determinedly. We are supposed to be self-supporting, aren't we? We are. Therefore, we've got to keep these meadows, granges, and vineyards, haven't we? And he indicated them on the map. I gave away all I could, but these we've got to have. Now our great work is the divine office. We're choir monks. That's the heart of Benedictinism. Just look at the rule. And the abbot turned the text toward Stephen, flipped over the chapters, counting aloud as he went. 12 whole chapters devoted to the details of the Opus Dei, as Benedict calls it. That tells a story, Stephen. The saint insisted that nothing be preferred to this work of God. Now see my dilemma. I want to be utterly self-supporting, and yet I want a perfect choir. That is, all the members present for all the hours, and all the hours chanted in church. Stephen cupped his chin in his hand, put his elbow on the desk, and stared at the map and the rule. Alberic watched him a moment. When no comment came, he said, Now, how are we to have a perfect choir when so many must be away at the granges or the meadows? And how are we to support ourselves if we have a perfect choir? That's my dilemma. You're on the horns, all right. I know that, but what I want to know is whether I can get off. By combining the ideas of the Duke and John Galbert? Exactly. But note that I insist on the Duke's idea more than on Galbert's. I want these lay assistants to be lay brothers. I want them to be real religious, men who take the same vows as we do, live the same rule we do, be brothers to everyone in the house and sons to the abbot, men who will be real members of the community and observe everything exactly as we do, with a single exception of choir. That's my idea at the moment. Now tell me, can it be done? Can we make serfs monks? Stephen thought for a moment. The idea was so new to him that he dared not pronounce it immediately. Objections leapt at him. Wasn't this seeking support from others by a subterfuge? Could men be religious who did not pray the office? How could those who lived on the granges be under the abbot? Wouldn't this eventually lead to the elimination of manual labor for the choir monks? He put these and other questions to Alberic in all sincerity. The speed and finality with which the abbot answered them showed that they were not new to him, that they had occurred to him long before he broached the subject to his prior. When he had been satisfied on these points, the prior said, I shouldn't ask, can we make serfs monks? I should ask, can we make serfs saints? For that is what you're planning to do. Right. For all people are called to sanctity, Stephen. But I'll wager with you right now that many a man in the humble role of lay brother will scale loftier heights of holiness than their brothers in the choir. Their life will be simpler, and believe it or not, there is an intimate connection between sanctity and simplicity. But at the moment, I'm just looking at the demands of the rule. I want to be self-supporting, and I want to have a perfect choir. Can it be done? You seem to have worked the whole thing out quite thoroughly, Reverend Father. I don't see why it can't be done. The rule doesn't prescribe it explicitly, but your argument, your dilemma, comes directly from the rule. What amuses me at the moment is to have the rigor, or as you insist, the radicalism, that is so typical of us, leading us to what is actually an innovation. Alberic pushed the map and the text of the rule to the back of the desk. Then, turning to his prior, he said, "The idea is not exactly new with me, Stephen. When we were at Molem, old John, the widower, and his only boy impressed me as two very saintly souls. Do you remember them?" Stephen nodded. They were religious in everything but name, profession, and external garb. They prayed more than many of the monks. They worked for God rather than for the abbey, or rather they made their work at the abbey their tribute to God. I used to wonder then if some scheme couldn't be devised to incorporate them into the community. It is only now, after listening to the Duke and reflecting on what John Gilbert did, that the scheme comes to me. The idea was growing on Stephen. He recalled other serfs who were like old John and his son. He became enthusiastic. "Why, Father Abbot, there must be hundreds, yes, thousands of men, not only among the serfs, but even among the lower nobility, and perhaps in the higher nobility, who long for just such an institution. They want to give themselves and all they have to God, and yet feel no inclination toward the choir work. There must be hundreds of carpenters, smiths, masons, artisans of all sorts, stonecutters, woodcutters, tillers of the soil, right here in Burgundy, who would love to dedicate their talents to the service of God. Think what an opportunity you would be offering them." "I've thought of them," said the abbot, and his eyes kindled. "And I've thought of others. I am sure there must be many a man who thinks himself unworthy to stand in choir and sing the praises of God, and yet is burning body and soul with a consuming desire to dedicate himself to God. Think what it will mean to such. Think what a thrill will be theirs to find themselves on a religious level with the choir monks. I insist on that equality. They are going to be as much a part of that community as the abbot, the prior, or anybody else. You think it can be done?" "I do, and I'm for doing it right away." The abbot chuckled. "Ah, environment is telling. The fiery French are doing things to the conservative English. Well, I'll make a confession, Stephen. It's already been done. That is to say, practically done. I've approached Gilbert and his little group. They said they would talk it over and think it over, and they did. They came to me a week ago, begging to begin right away. I put them off for a week. It ends tomorrow." "So you've been keeping secrets from me?" "Well, yes and no. I had to consult my lady first. I had to offer her a week of prayer. She is my good counselor, you know, my seat of wisdom. The week ended this morning, so you see, I told you as soon as I could." Stephen looked at his abbot with admiration and affection. Alberic always sounded like a little boy when he spoke of his lady. "Reverend Father," said Stephen, "your devotion to the Mother of God has done more for this community and for you than any other factor in the whole process of our foundation and growth. Your lady has become their lady. She sanctifies." Children need a mother, Stephen, and the oldest of us is only a child of fuller growth. More, knights need a lady, and we're knights of God, Our Lady of Citeaux. What a beautiful title for us to give her, and how well she deserves it. She has led us by the hand all these years. She has inspired almost every move. She will yet bring us home. She has given me the courage to make this innovation, and here is a thought she inspired. We have been battling for manual labor, haven't we? That has been the real crew of the whole situation, replied Stephen. Well, just think what this institution of a lay brotherhood will do to manual labor. It will force the world to recognize it for what it really is, a sacramental. Too many nobles are looking down on manual labor, Stephen. They think it undignified. Great heavens, don't you ever read the gospel? Jesus Christ didn't merely dignify labor, he divinized it. Hands that traced the courses for the planets and set the stars in the Milky Way grew calloused calloused, Stephen, from hammer, saw, and plane. Arms that upheld the universe grew weary from working on wood. The brow that hid divine intelligence grew wet with the sweat of labor. The world has never learned that lesson, Stephen. It has ever looked upon work as lowly. It is high time for the world to be retaught. It is high time for us to reteach what Christ taught so eloquently. The Redeemer of the world was a laborer, a common craftsman. Co-redeemers must be the same. Lay brothers, let us call them that. Lay brothers can be other Christs. It can be done, we'll do it. Alberic did it. He really gave a new principle to religious life by the institution of the lay brotherhood. Of course, John Golbert was the first to introduce the idea. That was back in 1050. But Alberic shaped his idea in so happy and original a fashion that it actually became a new principle. Before he died, Stephen saw what a world of thanks heaven and earth owed to the silver lance and his lady for that innovation. For he saw that heaven was being peopled by a veritable army of mighty saints, the lay brothers. Men who were great in their littleness, sublime in their simplicity, and towering in their tremendously humble sanctity. As for earth, the lay brothers had preached as no one before them except the God-man had preached. They told the world that labor is a sacramental, a means to sanctification. Alberic got off the horns of his dilemma by making it possible for millions to win their crowns of glory. It gladdened everyone's heart, especially the heart of God.